now that we've coded how the player can actually move, we need to make it so that we can move the player. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back down into the draw grid function. Now there's something we should do before we actually do this, and that is check whether or not the player has won. And that's just it's going to be easier to see and fit it in now than it will be to do it at a later date. So if we do if self.character 1 is equal to true, and then I'll just do the else now, and everything below this now needs to be indented by 1, and that's fine. And what we put inside here is I'll just put print you have beaten monster, congratulations. And then we'll do choice is equal to input, press any key to return to the menu, or press enter to exit. And I should spell choice wrong, correct. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do if choice, then that's going to be self.display menu. And that's a simple enough check. And finally, I'm going to do if the player has died or not. And that is going to be elif self.character alive is equal to false. Then print you have been eaten by the monster. And this is going to again have this same ending, so I'll just copy and paste this over. And that is all of that done. Now what we need to do is if we go down into the main area here, what we need to remove is the flask and the trap from being visible. And the reason for that is because it's not much of a game if you can see where you're actually trying to get to and what you're running from. So there's no point having that there. But now what we're going to do is below both of these for loops, I'm going to print out a blank line, and then I'm going to print out move using WASD. And then I'm going to get the choice, and that is going to be an input, and it's going to say move, and then we're going to pass. We're going to do if player move choice is equal to false, and then we're going to print out not a valid move. And you'll remember that earlier on when we made the player move function, which is here, we've got it return false if it can't actually, if it's going outside of the boundary, or if it's not a valid letter passed in. And so if we go back to the draw grid and down here, when we compare this to being false, false will only occur if it's not a valid move. And so what we need to do here is we need to give them the draw grid option again so that they can try again. And now what we need to do is just do else, and we have some final checks to do here, and the first one is going to be if the monster is awake. If the monster is awake, then we need to do self.move monster, which is something we're going to create in a moment, or later on in this course at least. And then finally we are going to do if self.collision check is equal to true. So if the player has collided into something whilst moving, then we need to check what they collided with, and so that's going to be self.monster awakened. Remember we set that equal to true before. If you walk into the monster, then that is set to true. And then what we need to do is we need to do self.monster awake is equal to true, and we need to print you awoke the monster. Now it may not make sense why we are actually having awakened and awake if awakened is now going to be set back to false, and that will never change again. But the reason why we've done that is because you can only collide with the trap once, and we want to have it so that we can compare if they've collided with the trap, then the awakened is equal to true. And because the awakened is equal to true, the monster is now awake. But because the awakened is equal to true, we can output this message. If we were to just do if monster awake, if the monster is awake, then output this message, then every single time it will say you awoke the monster, which is not ideal because it's not strictly true. And finally, what we need to do is we just go back 2 tabs and do draw grid. And what this will do is it will keep going until the player has won or lost. And so if we refresh this and type number 1, you get WASD. Now I'm just going to do one demonstration of each movement. So if we try and move W, which is north, we get it is not a valid move and it stays where it is. If we try and move south, there seems to be a problem here, so let's just have a quick look. Okay, player move A, and there's the problem. I typed a little s, and I was comparing for big S's. If we refresh that and do 1, and I want to move south, there we go. You can see the squares now moved down 1. And if I want to move west, you say it's not a valid move. If I want to move east, and there I didn't change that to a D, I changed it to an S. We try this again. There we go. So that is now moving where we are telling it to. And apparently I just beat monster. That was completely coincidental that I ran into the flask and appeared to have won. But as you can see, the game works to a certain extent. Now what we need to do is we need to make it so that the monster chases us once we awaken it. You'll remember before we had some code here which we deleted. I'm actually going to add that back in because it makes it a bit easier for us to compare where the monster is. Where the trap is, sorry. So that's all I'm going to add in is the trap one for now. So str self.trap position 0 is equal to x and str self.trap position. This won't be actually in the main once the game has been completed. It's just for testing. And while I'm at it, I may as well add the flask back in as well. And then we can delete these at a later date anyway. Okay, so now if we run this, we got 1. You'll see here that the trap is at the bottom, so I'm going to work my way down to that, and I'm just going to comment out that area so that we can see everything that we need to see, including the monster, so I don't accidentally run into the monster. If I go south 3 times, I awaken the monster. Now normally this will make this show, but since we had it showing anyway, it makes no difference. But now that the monster's awake, what we need to do is make it so it chases us. And currently there is no attribute called move monster, which we haven't created yet. So that is what the next video will be on, and I will see you then.